thanks for joining me, Allison, for Where I'm From, number 64 with Ellen. What are you reading? I read Men Explain Things to Me by Rebecca Solnit, which is one of these things I feel like I have read because it's an essay that's referenced all the time, but I hadn't, and I'm glad I did. I loved her essay also. I liked them all, but I love the one about Virginia Woolf and contemplating like mystery and darkness and how lots of ideas and creativity come out of the unknown and darkness and sort of letting ourselves be open to that idea. It was really beautiful, and now I'm probably going to read more of her books. I'm waiting for Ellen to join me. I also read Exteriors by Annie Arnaud, the Nobel Prize winner for literature. I'm ending the year with slim volumes. And her work. So I hope that you're having a good end of your year. Okay. Hello. Time number 2 is going to be the charm. Hello again. So how are you, Ellen?
Good, good. Hey, this is part of it all, right?
It sure is.
So we're
It
good.
is.
Yeah.
So we were talking about how you are from Kentucky and Georgella is from Kentucky and that your paths have crossed, you were saying.
Right. I took a class with her at the Kentucky Women's Writers Conference, and she's just such a great teacher and a generous soul. And I just love how things like this format can become so generative for all of us. And really what it was like, I wrote a version of this poem years ago, and then when I saw your podcast, I went back in and rewrote it, and it was amazing to see what else able to add, and it's something you can do and redo at different points in your life, and it's going to be different. And anyway, it was really great. It really was fun and illuminating. And yeah,
I'm glad it was fun and illuminating. She has written, I think, like just in so many, she can't even count versions of this poem. And I have found her to be such a generous and supportive person. Like I'm going to tear up just thinking about it because, lots of times you meet people and they're not who you might think they would be. And she absolutely is. And so that's special. Um, yeah, I got to make it to Kentucky someday. I've
absolutely.
never
And
been.
yeah, look me up.
Yeah,
We'll get her, and we'll all go to lunch.
that would be so fun.
Yeah.
Um, so when you revisited this poem, was it like a fully new one, or did you just sort of
I
expand?
deepened what was there, and I
Mm-hmm.
expanded it. I made it much longer, and I took what I already had on the page and kind of just went a little deeper with it.
That's so cool. Do you want to read it, or is there anything else you'd like to
Oh,
chat about?
well, just to say thank you for
Oh, of
doing,
course.
thank you for your words. Yeah, I love, I know the internet gets and social media gets a lot of heat, but
It
boy,
sure does.
the community of writers, there's nothing, I think it's a unique thing in the world of social media. So I'm really thankful for that. So
I
thank
am too. And I know you're about to read, and I don't want to, but there was a quote in the Atlantic that was like, social media is terrible. We should all just pull away from it. And I read it and I thought kind of what you just said, that I don't know if I'd be writing as much as I am without the community of writers that I've met
you.
through social media because it's a lonely
Oh,
enterprise. And it's hard for me. I'll speak for myself. It's hard for me to day in and day out think that my voice really is necessary. And if I didn't have people encouraging me, I think I would just stop.
yeah,
So
I hear you.
I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah, there is this feeling, who cares? But the truth is, the specific we are about our own experiences, and the more we share them, the more we find they're totally universal, and there are people
Mhm.
waiting for that.
Mhm.
There are people waiting to hear what we have to say, and so it's incredibly reinforcing. And
Yeah.
yeah.
So thanks for saying that. I totally agree.
Well, okay, so I'll plunge in here.
Yes, plunge
where
in.
where I'm from. I am from stacks of books on end tables, from secondhand smoke and shiny red cans of Coke. I am from apartments, each the same only because they hold our worn couch and the brown and white Afghan knitted by my distant grandmother. I'm from John and Elizabeth, a bright spot in their unhappy union. I'm from afternoon television, Bewitched, the Flintstones, and Scooby-Doo. I'm from frozen pizza and bags of greasy fast food, and from my mother's goulash and raspberry trifle made after working long shifts in the hospital. I'm from her warm kisses and lingering hugs and the lonely marriage that echoed behind them. I'm from trips to the library and afternoons at the zoo, from Ramona and James and the giant peach, from Joe, Meg, Amy, and Beth. I'm from an angry man who'd shout at the world, then put on the record player at night and smile at my sisters and I as we danced and sung along. I'm from plays performed in the neighbor's backyard, from fly swatters and homemade strawberry ice cream. I'm from candy bars out of vending machines and laundromat popcorn, from games of hide and seek at sunset and sleepy mornings reading the funnies. I'm from cerebral palsy and early birth, from stiff lower legs and falls on the concrete, from schoolyard taunts and funny best friends, from sisters who looked out for me and laughed with me. I'm from dewdrop diamonds on the grass and honeysuckle nectar on my tongue, from tall trees and blue skies, from big dreams, some of which came true.
Thank you, Ellen. That was beautiful. I relate to so much of it. The TV and the books. That's like definitely was a coping tool for my childhood. I loved Bewitched. So whenever anyone mentions it, I feel like happy inside. That's how much I loved it.
Yeah, and it's so funny because when I watched it, it was so dreamy. But when I look at it now, I just have this sort of feminist response, like her only power, the only way she would have power is if they made her a witch. That just pissed me off so
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. But back then it was like just how everything was.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
she had power because she had powers. So that seemed cool to me. It's like,
Right,
oh,
right.
can I be Tabitha and get powers so that I can do stuff? Yeah, you're right. I'm sure if I watched it now, I'd be horrified. But I mean, compared to I Dream of Jeannie, it was a feminist
Absolutely.
manifesto.
Close the load said it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I also watched, but I watched all of it. I was not a discerning viewer, and so I loved your closing line about dreams, and some of them came true because I think that I maintain that that's something that being grown up is, right, with this acceptance of some dreams come true and some don't, and where do you find yourself on that continuum of acceptance?
Yeah, and how do you redefine what success means? And the older I get, the more I'm surprised by it's always the small moment. It's always the small moment in the room when you get it right on the page. It's not the big moment. It's not, it's not all that. It's always that small moment. Or it's that one person who says, oh, I read your essay and I really felt that. Or, oh, I read your book and I saw myself in there. Or I've had women say, I have lost girls stories too, and that meant they had a story of loss and sometimes of struggle and sometimes of triumph. And so, yeah, just redefining that idea of what success means. And then sort of really, I guess, when I was a kid, I thought you only had those dreams. Now I realize you've got new ones that come up all the time,
Yeah, and I mean, most of mine from childhood were I just didn't even know what was available.
Right.
I mean, your dreaming is definitely affected by what you see and what you know, and as you get older and you have more experiences, your dreams can evolve and include new things. And I mean, I've said this lots of times to my husband, but I didn't really think I'd be happy, so I am, and all the other stuff seems small.
Absolutely.
In the end.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to say the same thing, you could tell from the poem. the relationship that was in front of me, the primary male-female relationship, was not a happy one. And so to have that as something in my life is so huge. Everything else is small in comparison.
And you don't want to make it like that's the end goal, which is not what I'm
Right.
saying. If you don't have that, you're not happy. I
Right.
think for me, it's in myself, like, and definitely having that relationship has helped me get there.
Yeah.
Because, and I don't know if you heard this, but it was like, oh, well, you're not going to have that. Like, people aren't going to love you,
Right.
and so I believed that for a long time.
Yeah.
And then, oh, actually, people can love me. I'm lovable. Like,
it, it does feel like such a surprise,
yeah,
doesn't it? It's like, wait a minute, what? Me? Really? Really?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's like but I just thought that was I love that ending because I think that's true of everyone
Yeah.
in the world, no matter how. And I think sometimes we can forget, like, oh, this person has $1 billion or Oscars or Nobels or whatever. Like, still, I guarantee all their dreams didn't come true. Like,
Right.
that's just the nature of living.
Absolutely. Absolutely, that's true. And it's so funny. I live in a neighborhood. I live about 2 or 3 blocks over from where I did most of my serious growing up and where
Oh,
there was
wow.
most family drama. Yeah. And I passed the tree that I remember, sitting under dreaming, or the grass that had the dewdrops on them,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so funny to think about how far I've come, you know, um, since those days. And it's just a constant reminder. And sometimes I pass it in sadness, and other times, other times I'm happy and I'm like, okay, you made it out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
there is definitely grief. I think
yeah.
if you acknowledge it, honestly, there's grief because
Yeah.
it's not what you might. It's definitely not what you wanted. So, but that's the main thing. I don't. I live probably an hour and a half from where I grew up, and whenever I do go back, I'm always struck by how it's also small. Everything that felt immense and I don't know, immovable.
Yeah.
It's just the house, it's just a dock. It's just what it is, but it felt mythic almost.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's, oh, I love what you're saying there. I think that's really true. And you feel so small in that environment,
Yeah.
and yeah, been
Yeah.
know what you're saying for sure.
Yeah. And so obviously Little Women was a touch point for you. Did you read a lot as a child? I definitely did.
Oh, I really, really did. And my father, who I referenced in the poem, despite being kind of a big, angry person who took up all the air in the room, also brought me books, and so that was really helpful. He gave me Harriet the Spy, which was a book that really, it was a book that said it's okay to be different and it's okay to be on the outside looking in, you know. And so that was really helpful. But yeah, I was just a really voracious reader. I loved the Ramona books because
Mm-hmm.
she acted out so much in ways that I think we all wanted to do. I love Little Women. The camaraderie and the competition between the sisters was totally real to me. Harriet the Spy. Yeah, all of James and the Giant Peach. As a kid who was afraid of everything, to watch this other kid in that book take off on this giant peach out into the world, was just astounding. It was like, I could do that. I can go out into the world someday. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me now how many books the kids have. It's like we didn't have as many choices. And do you revisit those books?
I do.
Have you revisited them?
Yeah, yeah. I keep them on the bookshelf and go
Mm-hmm.
back to them. And I have to say also the Little House books were really,
Mm-hmm. A
and
lot of kids loved those. I
oh,
couldn't.
yeah. Well, I have to say during COVID I reread The Long Winter because they were surviving a
Yeah.
and it felt like a little bit of camaraderie. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. When you were writing this poem or rewriting it in your case, were you surprised at some of the things that you remembered or that bubbled up to the surface, or was it how you remember things in
You know,
general?
I was. I mean, I guess the thing that struck me was that just moments would come back. The secondhand smoke and the shiny red Coke can, what it was like in the living room. Oh my God, you know, with my father drinking the Coke, smoking the cigarettes,
Mm-hmm.
the plays that we would put on for our neighbor, which was a real moment of joy because the neighbor loved us and would pay attention and would watch the plays and would clap even when they were horrible, and the strawberry ice cream, that I remember my mom making, she had this hand crank thing, and the thing was we were all going to make it, but she ended up doing it for hours, only her,
Yes.
God bless her. And then unfortunately probably got criticized for it, the vending machine candy and the laundromat popcorn, the little pleasures.
Laundromat popcorn. That was like very specific and of
Yeah.
a time.
And also of the fact that we didn't have, we lived in an apartment and we
Yeah.
didn't have money for a washer dryer, so we were at the laundromat, and so yeah, the specificity of it, I think,
Yeah.
really kind of kept punching me a tiny bit, and then for me it was like, well, how complete am I going to be, because my family didn't make a big deal about the CP, so for a long time it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really even a big part of how I saw myself, and yet it was very real, and there were those falls and there were those struggles at school with the kids who would pick out the kids who were different,
Yeah.
and so the question of, well, where do I add this, and I thought near the end was kind of good as a counterpoint to the beautiful things,
Mm-hmm.
the way I would notice the dew on the grass, or the way we learned to pull apart the honeysuckle so you could taste it. It's always the bitter sweet. I mean, it's always the bitter and the sweet, right? So,
Yeah. And I mean, I agree with you that putting it at the end, because it's not your whole story.
right.
It's part of your story. And I think that's something many of us can relate to. You don't want something to define you, whatever that thing is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and did your parents or your family not make a big deal out of it because they just weren't dealing with it, or were they accepting and just like, oh, well, this is
I
just
think
part of
it was
Ellen?
both. I think it was really both. I think they really loved me and they noticed the things about me that were bright and that made them happy. And they noticed those more than they noticed the other thing. I think
That's lovely.
we love her as she is, and and their thing was always just to put me in any kind of situation that my sisters would be in and not see it as anything. So I think part of it was really wanting me to thrive. And I think part of it was they had a tremendous capacity for denial because they were so unhappily married for so many years, and they just knew how to put things on the shelf. And so it was weird. It was positive in a way because it taught me how to how to be in the world and not be self-conscious about it. But then in other ways, as I got older, as the physical challenges got more apparent,
Yeah.
it was as if I had to fight against my sense of reality. It's like, no, actually you do need help. There are things that are struggles. And so that's been my biggest challenge, here in adulthood, is how to reconcile that pick yourself up and go on message that I got with how when you really get older and you've got this combination of things going on, it's just not that easy. I need to ask for help. And so that's what I'm learning to do, learning to own that, and to not, because I really did hide it for so long. And that's been a huge struggle. I wrote an essay for the Ethel that dealt with.
I read it. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. And that took 57 years for me to actually be able to synthesize it in my head and put it on paper. And so this for me is it's all discovery now, and it's all sort of coming out into the world with the entirety of who I am, and owning it, and it's really liberating.
Yeah.
It's positive. I'm glad.
And I feel like there just hasn't been a lot of space for people with disabilities of different races, to say, this is my experience. That's all. I don't need to apologize for it. I don't need to conform for your comfort. This is what I'm experiencing.
Right. I'm nobody's hero.
Right.
I'm not pitied. I'm not to be elevated. I am
Yeah,
just like you. And the truth is, there's a spectrum of disability
of course.
that all of us are eventually on at some point,
Yes.
or will be on if we're lucky
Yes.
enough to live that long.
Yeah.
So all of that is really fascinating, and there's so much middle ground, and
Mhm.
that's what I think people don't really understand. And so, yeah, it's been. I mean, I'm still learning. I'm still
Of
learning in that.
course. I mean, I think we all are all the time if we're alive and engaging. Like,
Yeah.
we're all learning. There's no, like, I think that's actually a big part of growing up for me anyway, was there's no, like, finish line where the dreams are finished, where the learning's finished, where, you just kind of continue on. And that's a gift. I mean, I feel alive because I'm doing those things.
Yeah.
Um,
Such a great point. Such a great point. No finish line. It's all process.
yeah.
I love
Yeah, well, it's a relief because, of course, you're not going to know everything. I mean, and so I think sometimes when we feel like we should, or when I have, it's like in a way, I think it stops. It would stop me from engaging because I just wouldn't want to do the wrong thing.
right.
And it's good to keep engaging and to figure these things out. And you're right, it is a continuum, and we're all going to be on it someday if we're not already on it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's part of life, and our society doesn't. It's like they want it as really society seems like you want it to be invisible. Like we just don't want to really deal head on with that. Challenges are part of existence, or
Yeah.
changes if you don't like challenges.
I think there's a lot of fear. I think there's a
Yeah,
lot of I don't want to be
yeah,
like X, or I
yep.
don't want to have that thing. But the interesting thing about it too, and for me to experience varying levels of disability over
Mm-hmm.
time, because I now have rheumatoid arthritis too,
Yeah.
is the wonderful capacity for me, but everybody, I think, to find ways to pivot, to find ways to cope, to put your energy in other areas, and to be able to give up certain things and walk towards other things. And again, it's all about growth, right? It's what we're all doing anyway, whether we want to or not. So,
Mm-hmm.
so that part's been really, I've been really interested and gratified by my ability to cope and to find other ways to pivot, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's in us all, you know.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is the way I grow older because we're not going to be able to continue doing what we once did. It's
Right.
just reality. So, what now? Um, well, any other last thoughts, Ellen? I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh gosh, me too. I just thank you again for the opportunity, and I'll be tuning in as other people are sharing their work. And just thanks so much, and Happy New Year.
Oh, yeah. It's exciting. It's sort of an artificial sort of like, okay, but it is new. So my son said to me this morning, this year was a pretty good year. I hope they continue to get better. I hope so too.
Me too. Take care.
You too. Bye, Ellen.